An unfaithful husband abandoned his terminally ill wife. He brought his mistress to her farewell, caring only about her testament. Little did he know, even in death, she delivered a final surprise, one that left his blood running cold. "Finally, she's breathed her last," the husband murmured, a cynical grin etched across his face. "I was tired of waiting. I only hope the sum I receive is generous." Karim leaned against the wall of the funeral hall in Dubai, arms crossed, his gaze drifting over the mourners as if this were merely a trivial gathering. The coffin of his wife, Amira, lay at the center, surrounded by white lilies, sobbing relatives and friends, though he paid them no mind. To Karim, this was already the past. Beside him stood Nadia, his mistress, offering him a faint, knowing smile. An ambitious gleam lit her eyes. "You deserve it, after everything you've been through. Wouldn't you agree?" she quipped, her tone tinged with casual sarcasm. "She's been holding you back for far too long. Now you'll finally get what's rightfully yours." Karim let out a short sigh, his cold gaze flicking toward Amira's coffin without the slightest hint of sorrow. "She knew I was waiting for this. The inheritance she received from her aunt will cover all my expenses. Her sister Soraya claimed her portion months ago, so the rest must come to me. There's no one else." Nadia leaned against the wall, scrutinizing the funeral attendees with disdain. "What good would all that money do in her hands now? We can truly live with this fortune. We can go anywhere." A triumphant rush filled Karim's thoughts. To him, this was no funeral. It was the dawn of a new chapter. Amira's death would finally grant him the wealth and luxury he'd anticipated. Across the hall, Soraya clung to the coffin, her face swollen from endless tears. Karim threw her a quick glance before turning away in irritation. "What a waste of time," he muttered. Nadia chuckled under her breath, folding her arms. "When will they read it?" "Soon enough," Karim replied icily, looking at the coffin as if it were nothing more than a required formality. "I just hope there aren't any surprises." She wouldn't dare leave anything unexpected. Amira was always obedient. "Everything will end exactly as you planned." Nadia slid her fingers along Karim's arm, smiling. Indifference toward the mourning around them lingered in the air. Every moment at the funeral was simply another step toward what Karim believed was his rightful claim. After the service concluded and family members began to disperse, he exchanged a quick look with Nadia. It was time to focus on what truly mattered. Hours later, Karim sat in the lavish conference room of a well-known Dubai law firm. His pulse raced, not from grief, but anticipation. His impatience was almost palpable, and the grin he struggled to suppress betrayed his excitement. Soraya, seated across the table, was consumed by sorrow, but Karim paid her no attention. All he could think about was what awaited him. Advocate Hassan began reading out the will. A solemn hush fell across the room as he described Amira's instructions. A large portion of her estate will be donated to charities supporting cancer treatment initiatives and humanitarian projects abroad. Karim scoffed quietly and rolled his eyes. "Charities. As if that matters," he muttered to Nadia. The advocate continued, "To her husband, Karim Qasim, Amira has left an item of tremendous value, stored in a secure vault at the Central Bank of the Emirates. A code will be provided for him to access its contents." Hassan handed Karim a small sealed envelope, which he snatched up with trembling fingers. His anxious grin widened. Even without knowing what the vault held, he savored his rising excitement. "That's it?" Karim asked impatiently. "Yes, Mr. Qasim, it was Amira's final wish." Karim abruptly stood and barely acknowledged those present. Outside, Nadia fell into step beside him. "What did she leave you?" she asked, eyes bright with expectation. "The advocate mentioned it's extremely valuable." Whatever's inside that vault will be enough to give us the life we've always wanted. While hurrying toward the car, excitement surged within Karim. In his mind, he was already envisioning the fortune that awaited him. Jewelry? Cash? Shares? Did Amira finally leave me what belongs to me by right? He mused, clutching the envelope tightly. The car's engine growled as he turned the key. Moments later, they were speeding through the streets of Dubai. Karim could barely contain his eagerness, his pulse quickening with each block drawing them closer to the central bank of the Emirates. Nadia, seated next to him, was equally elated. Upon arriving, a security guard led them to a corridor lined with vaults. The silence there magnified the gravity of what was about to happen. A grin spread across Karim's face as he entered the code on the panel. Adrenaline coursed through him. When the vault clicked open at last, he leaned in, heart pounding in expectation, but the instant he glimpsed the contents, he froze in place. "Karim, what is it? What do you see?" Nadia asked. Karim said nothing, staring at the items before him as though trying to make sense of them. She believed he would stand by her side, supporting her through this unexpected journey. With shaking hands, she picked up her phone and sent a message to her husband, hoping with all her might that he would be the pillar she so desperately needed. Though the pregnancy was sudden and complicated, it offered her a renewed purpose to keep fighting. However, Karim did not share her enthusiasm. Across town, he lounged on a leather sofa in Nadia's apartment, sipping whiskey while she leafed through fashion magazines. His phone, discarded on the coffee table, lit up with a new notification. Karim picked it up absent-mindedly, but when he saw Amira's name, he sighed and opened the message with reluctance. As he read each sentence, his expression morphed from surprise to annoyance, and finally, to disgust. "Karim, I have incredible news. I'm pregnant. Please come see me as soon as you can. I really need you." With a sharp motion, Karim slammed the phone back onto the table, the impact echoing in the silence. Nadia, seated beside him, glanced up from the glossy magazine in her hands. "What's wrong, Karim?" she asked, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. Karim ran a hand over his face, his frustration evident. The news he'd just received was far from what he'd anticipated. "Amira is pregnant," he replied with disdain, his words laced with bitterness, as though they left a sour taste in his mouth. "How could I have been so foolish to let this happen?" Nadia blinked in surprise, her eyes widening briefly before a sly smile curled her lips. "Pregnant?" she repeated, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "But that doesn't change anything, does it? You're not going to run back to her just because of this, are you?" Karim let out a harsh, humorless laugh, his gaze darkening as he swirled the glass of amber liquid in his hand. "Of course not. This only makes things more complicated. I'm not going to take on another burden. She can barely take care of herself as it is. There's no way she'll handle this. Honestly, I hope she doesn't. It would only make everything worse." Nadia chuckled softly, sliding closer to him on the plush sofa. Her fingers traced a deliberate path along Karim's arm. "It seems the universe is working against you," she murmured, her tones steeped in malice. Karim shook his head grimly, his thoughts turning toward his own interests. He wouldn't allow a child, born of a relationship he already despised, to derail his plans. "I won't let this ruin everything. If she loses the baby, it's better for everyone. Just another thing that needs to end quickly." Nadia leaned in, pressing a light kiss to his neck, her smile growing with satisfaction. "You're right. This problem will disappear soon enough." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Amira waited. The hope she'd felt after sending her message to Karim was slowly being replaced by a growing unease. Every silent minute stretched like a blade cutting into her expectations. She kept staring at her phone, willing the screen to light up with a reply, but as the hours dragged on, nothing came. No calls, no texts. Amira tried to push away her darkest thoughts, but with each passing moment, the joy she'd initially felt upon discovering her pregnancy gave way to anxiety. Every second without word from her husband made her smile fade, replaced by a heavy sense of abandonment and worry. She tried calling him again, but as before, there was no answer. Could something terrible have happened? The questions gnawed at her, and the thought that Karim might be in danger filled her with dread. In a moment of desperation, Amira sent another message, shorter this time, simply asking where he was. Yet the silence from the other end of the line seemed louder than the steady hum of the machines around her. Suddenly, the door to her hospital room creaked open softly. Soraya, her sister, stepped in slowly. There was something unfamiliar in Soraya's expression, an air of somberness so heavy that it made Amira's stomach twist with unease. Soraya approached the bed with hesitant steps, eventually sitting down beside her. The silence between them was more agonizing than any words could have been. Amira studied her sister's face, and what she saw in her eyes made her throat tighten. Soraya was nervous, and she didn't need to say anything for Amira to know that something was deeply wrong. "Soraya, what is it?" Amira finally asked, her voice trembling with fear for the answer she already dreaded. Soraya took a deep breath, as if summoning strength to speak. Her gaze dropped to her restless hands, folded in her lap. Amira's heart began to pound, each beat filled with a growing sense of foreboding. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but it's about Karim," Soraya began, her voice heavy with hesitation. The mention of his name sent a jolt through Amira. Her stomach churned. "What happened?" she asked quickly, her tone laced with urgency and fear. Soraya looked down for a moment, as though gathering the courage to continue. When she finally raised her eyes, they were filled with sorrow and pain. "He hasn't responded because—" She paused, taking another deep breath. "Karim has a mistress, Amira. I recently found out. And from what I know, he's with her now. That's why he hasn't been visiting you." The words struck Amira like a dagger to the heart. Her breath caught for a moment, and it felt as if the ground beneath her feet was crumbling away. A mistress. Her mind refused to comprehend what she'd just heard. The promises Karim had made, the vows exchanged under the golden dome of the mosque, in good times and bad, all of it now felt like a cruel joke. "No," Amira murmured, her voice faltering, as if saying the word aloud might undo the harsh reality. "This cannot be true." Soraya grasped Amira's hand, her expression heavy with sorrow. "I know it's painful, Amira," Soraya continued, her voice full of compassion. "But he's abandoned you at the very moment you need him the most. I know it's hard to accept, but you needed to know, so you can move forward." The harsh truth weighed heavily on Amira. Silent tears began to stream down her face as she tried to process the devastating revelation. Everything she'd envisioned, all the plans she'd made, were collapsing before her eyes. Now, all she had left was her sister and the unborn child she carried, who was also struggling to survive. Despite her shattered heart, Amira knew she had to remain strong, not for Karim, but for herself and the life growing inside her. Becoming a mother had always been her greatest dream, and even as cancer ravaged her body, the new life within her was a beacon of light in the darkness. Amira placed a hand on her belly, imagining the moment she would hold her baby, hear its cries, and watch it grow. This child was her anchor, the one source of solace that brought a smile amid the chaos of her illness. She spoke to the baby in hushed whispers, promising love and protection. "We have to stay strong, my child," she murmured softly, caressing her stomach. "Mama is enduring all this. For you." But as the days passed, the harsh reality of her situation became unrelenting. The aggressive cancer treatments were at odds with the fragility of her pregnancy, and her already weakened body became a battlefield where each small victory felt fleeting. Amira clung to hope, but it began slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. The baby, once her anchor, now seemed to be slipping away, as if fate itself was intent on taking even this last chance at happiness. One night, a searing pain in her abdomen became unbearable. Amira tried to dismiss it, to convince herself it was just a fleeting discomfort. But deep down, she knew. Panic welled in her chest as she called for the nurses, desperately clinging to the last shred of hope. But when the doctors entered the room, their faces solemn under the cold, sterile lights of the hospital, Amira understood what was happening. She was losing the baby. The physical agony ripping through her body paled in comparison to the emotional devastation. Alone, Amira clutched her belly as if trying to hold on to the life slipping away from her. "Oh, God, please. No, this can't be happening," she whispered, tears streaming down her face as her soul shattered into pieces. The doctor, his face etched with compassion, approached her bedside and gently held her hand. "Amira," he said softly, his voice filled with regret. "I'm so sorry. But the baby didn't make it. We did everything we could, but your body couldn't endure it." She heard nothing else. It was as though her very soul had been torn from her, along with the baby's. The one glimmer of hope she'd clung to, the single ray of light amidst the chaos, was now extinguished, and Amira, utterly drained, finally felt as though she had no strength left to piece herself back together. That night, Amira wept alone, without Karim, without her baby, without hope. The next morning, Soraya arrived, devastated by the news. She tried to comfort Amira, but her words were swallowed by the immense grief enveloping her sister. There was nothing to say, nothing that could fill the void left by such a profound loss. Amira simply stared at the ceiling, too exhausted to respond. The silence between them was heavy, laden with the understanding that some wounds cannot be healed with words. Amira's days had devolved into an unending cycle of pain, medical procedures, and profound silence. Waking up each morning meant facing another round of ineffective medications, relentless tests confirming the inevitable, and pitiful gazes from those around her. The once hopeful expressions of the nurses who attended her had been replaced by quiet resignation, their eyes reflecting a truth unspoken yet understood by all. Amira knew her time was slipping away, and so did everyone else. The forced smiles of the medical staff, once meant to comfort her, now felt heavy with sadness. Though their gestures carried kindness, exhaustion lurked beneath. Every word of encouragement sounded distant, as though the fight had already been lost, and the days ahead were merely the final steps of a journey already decided. Amira no longer had the strength to respond. All she could do was wait for her time to run out completely. One morning, as her gaze drifted aimlessly toward the window, Sheikh Tariq entered the room. He was a man of calm presence, his silver hair and serene demeanor speaking of years of wisdom and experience. Amira heard his steps but didn't immediately turn toward him. Something deep within kept her tethered to her reflective state. As he always did, the sheikh approached quietly, his mere presence offering a sense of solace. Taking a seat beside her bed, he waited patiently, allowing her the space to speak when she was ready. For a while, silence filled the room, shared between them like an unspoken understanding. Finally, Amira broke the quiet, her voice soft and filled with pain. "Sheikh Tariq, why has Allah allowed me to endure this?" she asked, her words trembling with sorrow. "What have I done to deserve losing everything? My child, my life. Was this my fate?" The sheikh leaned slightly closer, his expression tranquil. "You are not being punished, my dear," he said gently. "Allah has not forsaken you. He is with you, even in your suffering." Amira shook her head as tears welled up in her eyes. "But why?" she cried. "Why would he give me a child only to take them away? What purpose could that serve? I only wanted a chance to be a mother, to find happiness." Her voice faltered, and the tears began to flow freely. Sheikh Tariq reached out his hand, resting it lightly on hers with a warmth that spoke of empathy and understanding. "Life presents us with trials, my child, and though they may bring great pain, there is always a lesson to be learned. Sometimes it is difficult to see the greater purpose amidst the hardship. But I believe there is always something larger at work." Amira looked at him, her tear-streaked face filled with doubt. "I have lost everything," she whispered. "My husband abandoned me. My child is gone. Now, I'm losing my own life. What purpose could there possibly be in that?" The sheikh's expression softened even further. "Sometimes, the purpose is not found in what we lose, but in what we leave behind, in the bonds we forge, the memories we create, and the lives we touch. You are leaving more behind than you may realize, Amira." Amira nodded slightly, her thoughts turning inward as she absorbed his words. Her gaze shifted back to the window as she continued. "You know, Sheikh Tariq, I've been thinking a lot lately. About life, about death, about everything I've lived through, and all the things I'll never experience." The sheikh remained silent, encouraging her to speak her mind. "It's strange, isn't it?" she said finally, turning to face him. "We spend our lives worrying about such trivial things, money, status, work, and in the end, none of it matters. None of it can change the fact that I'm here, waiting to die, while the world keeps moving on." Her voice grew heavy with regret. "I always thought I'd have more time to do the things I dreamed of, to be a mother, to be happy. But now, all I feel is that time has been stolen from me." Sheikh Tariq observed her with compassion, sensing the weight of her grief. He had encountered many such moments with others in similar circumstances, yet each was profoundly unique. "Time is beyond our control, my child," he said softly. "We live as though it is infinite. But the truth is, none of us knows how much we truly have. What matters is not how much time we have left, but what we do with it." Amira's eyes met his, a flicker of determination within the sorrow. "And what can I do with the time I have left?" she asked, her tone laced with bitterness. "I'm trapped in this bed. All that's left for me is to wait for death. There's nothing else." Sheikh Tariq leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady and filled with earnestness. "Sometimes, the only thing we can do is seek peace. Death may take away the body, but it can never claim the soul." Amira gazed at the ceiling for a long moment, tears welling up in her eyes. As much as it hurt, she understood that she had to find that peace somehow. Deep down, perhaps she had already begun to take the first steps along that path. After the imam left, Amira remained silent, alone in her hospital room, her thoughts wandering. She recalled the inheritance she had received from her aunt, a fortune that she and her sister Soraya had divided. It was more money than she had ever imagined having in her lifetime. Yet, as she lay on the hospital bed, Amira pondered the true worth of such wealth. "What's the point?" she thought, her weary eyes staring into the void. "I have all this money, but it can't restore my health, extend my life, or bring my baby back." What once seemed like a source of security now felt like a bitter reminder that, in the end, some things are beyond human control. All the wealth in the world wouldn't change the fact that her body was failing. While Amira battled for her life in the hospital, Karim indulged in a completely different world. A world of luxury, fleeting pleasures, and unrestrained selfishness. He rarely thought of his ailing wife, except during the occasional moments when he needed to check the accounts and ensure everything remained in his name. Karim had no qualms about spending the money Amira inherited from her aunt. To him, it was compensation for enduring years of marriage. With Amira out of the picture, he felt liberated to live as he pleased. Alongside Nadia, his mistress, he wandered the glitzy streets of Dubai, dined at the most exclusive restaurants, and basked in the opulence they both craved. That evening, Karim and Nadia sat at one of the city's most luxurious dining establishments, the kind of place where a single bottle of wine cost more than the monthly income of most families. Seated at a table adorned with candles and intricate floral arrangements, they seemed utterly detached from the struggles of the world. Karim browsed the wine menu, a satisfied grin spreading across his face. "Let's order the finest wine they have," he said, utterly unconcerned about the cost. "Tonight is special." Nadia chuckled, leaning closer, her eyes sparkling with delight. "You always know how to make me happy," she replied, shooting him a flirtatious glance. "But I think I deserve something extra after dinner. Perhaps a gift? Something that sparkles?" Karim smirked, well aware of her tastes. He loved indulging her, watching the light in her eyes when she unwrapped an expensive present. "You'll see," he teased, his tone playful. "I have something in mind." They clinked their glasses, laughter echoing as they reveled in their extravagant and shallow lifestyle. Karim knew he was burning through Amira's money, but it made no difference to him. "She won't need it. She's dying anyway," he thought dismissively. Meanwhile, Amira's time was running out, and she knew she had to act. She had come to terms with the fact that her life was nearing its end. Amid the pain and loneliness, a resolute decision began to take shape in her mind. There was still one thing she controlled, the fate of her wealth, and that would be her final and most definitive response to Karim. With Soraya's help, Amira reached out to her lawyer, Dr. Hassan. Despite her weakening state, she held the power to make her last wishes known. These decisions would change everything. The following morning, Hassan arrived at the hospital, a leather portfolio in hand, his expression calm but solemn. He had seen such moments before, clients preparing for their final arrangements. But there was something different about Amira. A quiet purpose underscored her every move. Amira awaited him, lying on her bed, frailer than during their previous meeting, but with a determined gaze. She understood that the steps she was about to take would deliver a blow Karim could never foresee. Karim, the unfaithful husband who had abandoned her in her darkest hour and now squandered her wealth as though he already owned it all. Dr. Hassan approached with measured steps, acutely aware of the gravity of the moment. Amira took a deep breath before speaking, each word laden with meaning. "Hassan, I need you to ensure that everything unfolds exactly as I intend," she said, her voice soft yet unwavering. "I want Karim to receive something special. When my will is read." Hassan studied her intently, understanding the weight of her words. There was a spark in Amira's eyes, a blend of determination and sorrow. This was not about petty revenge. She spoke of justice, of making Karim feel the weight of his actions. "As you wish, Amira," he replied in a respectful tone. "What do you want him to receive?" Amira smiled faintly, a tired, barely noticeable smile. "I've written a letter," she began, her gaze drifting toward the table beside her hospital bed, where a sealed envelope rested. "I want this letter to be handed to him on the day the will is read, but only after he learns what will truly be left for him in the vault." Hassan, the lawyer, carefully picked up the envelope, leaving it sealed, and placed it in his briefcase. He didn't need to know the letter's contents to understand the impact it would carry. Everything Amira did had a purpose, and he respected that. "I'll ensure it's delivered as per your instructions," Hassan said, mentally noting every detail. "And what about the rest of the inheritance?" she asked, determined to finalize everything. "We've discussed this before, but I want to ensure it's exactly as we planned." She turned her weary eyes toward the window. "Karim must not know a thing until the day comes. He needs to believe everything is unfolding as he expects, until the truth is revealed." Hassan nodded silently as he jotted down her wishes. He had worked with families before, but this situation had an unusual air. There was an ending being carefully orchestrated, one that Amira knew would shock everyone, especially Karim. While Amira made her final arrangements, Karim indulged in a life of excess and pleasure with Nadia. To him, Amira was no longer part of his present. She was merely a shadow from the past, one he was patiently waiting to vanish completely. What Karim didn't realize was that while he plotted his ambitious plans, Amira, even in her final days, was preparing something he could never foresee, something that would turn his dreams of wealth into a nightmare. 2 months passed after Amira had finalized her affairs. During this time, she fought bravely, but her fragile body could no longer endure. The illness claimed her life, and in the stillness of the hospital, Amira took her final breath. Her passing was peaceful, but the void she left was immense, especially for those who truly loved her. Soraya wept silently, mourning the loss of her sister. But for Karim, the news of Amira's death evoked a very different emotion. When the hospital called to inform him of her passing, Karim barely concealed his satisfaction. He hung up the phone and, instead of mourning, felt a profound sense of relief. The first person he shared the news with was Nadia, who was by his side at the time. "Finally," Karim exclaimed with a barely suppressed smile, "it's over. Now everything will be mine. The inheritance, the properties. I told you it would all work out for us." Nadia, sensing Karim's excitement, grinned slightly and embraced him enthusiastically. "I knew this day would come," she said, her eyes gleaming with ambition. "Now, my love, we can live the life we've always dreamed of. Nothing holds us back anymore." The couple's celebration was a cruel contrast to the somber silence enveloping the hospital. While Soraya arranged the funeral details, Karim and Nadia toasted to the new life they believed awaited them. In Karim's mind, the future was filled with luxury and comfort, and he was certain that Amira's wealth would soon be his. The grief was evident on the faces of friends and family who came to pay their last respects. But among them, Karim stood out, his impatience thinly veiled. While those around him were immersed in sorrow, his distant gaze betrayed his distraction, as though he were counting down the moments until the ceremony concluded. Every word of condolence he received was met with curt replies, his thoughts fixated on one thing: the inheritance. To Karim, the funeral was merely a necessary step toward his ultimate goal. He knew that after the burial, Amira's lawyer would read the long-awaited will, and that was the moment he eagerly anticipated. Time seemed to crawl. He glanced around, feigning attention to the imam's eulogy, but his mind was elsewhere. How much did she leave me? He wondered. Nadia, sensing his restlessness, gave his hand a gentle squeeze, sharing in his silent anticipation. They could barely wait to leave. The funeral, steeped in sorrow, finally came to an end, and the procession made its way to the cemetery, where Amira's body was laid to rest. Karim cast one final indifferent glance at the coffin, as though bidding farewell to a burden already forgotten. For him, this chapter was closed. Now, all that mattered was what came next. Shortly after the burial, Karim, Soraya, and a few close friends gathered in Hassan's office for the reading of Amira's will. The room was quiet, the atmosphere heavy with formality and tension. Continuing with the vault scene. The vault held no suitcases brimming with cash, no sparkling jewels, just a simple, fragile mirror reflecting the bewildered face of a man. "What is this?" Karim muttered, his gaze locked on his own reflection. His voice was low, tense, almost unrecognizable. Nadia approached, her brow furrowed, just as perplexed as he was. But before she could utter a word, Karim noticed something else in the vault, a slightly creased envelope lying beside the mirror. His hands, now trembling with frustration and confusion, snatched it up in a quick motion. He tore it open with haste, unable to bear the suspense any longer. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in Amira's unmistakable handwriting. Karim began to read. "Karim, you have always loved your own image more than anything else. I leave you this mirror so you can see every day the man you have become. I hope that as you gaze into your reflection, you will finally recognize the fool and coward you truly are. There is nothing else I could leave for you. This is all you deserve, your own image, worth absolutely nothing." The note slipped from his grasp. He had inherited nothing but the truth about himself, reflected in that plain yet merciless object. His body, once taut with anticipation, now seemed on the brink of collapse. He looked back at the mirror. The face of a shattered man stared back at him. Everything he had dreamed of, the wealth, the power, had crumbled to dust. All that remained was himself, and the brutal truth that Amira, even in death, had delivered. Nadia watched silently as Karim stood frozen, staring at the mirror as though he couldn't comprehend what had just happened. The tension in the room was suffocating. The man who moments ago exuded confidence was now on the verge of despair. His shoulders slumped, his hands trembling. Nadia stepped closer, her gaze cold as it fell upon the object. "So this is it?" she said, crossing her arms and looking at the mirror with disdain. Her voice carried a calculated iciness that made Karim look up, still bewildered, as though searching for an explanation or solace. "It can't be," he murmured, more to himself than to her. The echo of his voice felt hollow. "It can't end like this. This can't be all she left." Nadia let out a short, dry laugh devoid of any warmth. "Of course it can, Karim." Her sarcasm was sharp as a blade. "Did you really think your wife was foolish enough to hand over a fortune for you and me to squander together?" Karim blinked, disbelief still clouding his mind as though he were trapped in a nightmare. Nadia stepped back, her eyes scanning the man before her as though seeing someone she barely recognized. "I watched you plan this for months, down to the smallest detail. And now, all you have is a mirror." She laughed again, this time with a note of cruelty. Karim didn't respond. He was frozen, as though Nadia's words couldn't pierce the wall of denial he was struggling to maintain. But Nadia didn't stop. A suppressed anger was rising within her, frustration she could no longer contain. "I bet everything on you, Karim. I put all my faith in the idea that you'd bring me into this life of luxury, that we'd escape this hell. And now—" She pointed at the mirror, disdain dripping from every word. This is what you've managed to get? A reflection of the pathetic man you are?" Karim raised his eyes, desperation pooling in them as he sought something, anything, in Nadia's words. "This isn't the end. I'll find a way," he stammered, reaching for her arm. But Nadia pulled away sharply, as though recoiling from something vile. "A way out?" She spat the words. "There is no way out, Karim. You're finished. No money. No future. And honestly, no me either." The words struck Karim like a punch to the gut. The silence between them was suffocating. The distant chatter of bank employees sounded like an echo from a world he no longer belonged to. "Are you leaving me now?" he asked, his voice trembling, as if trying to hold on to the last shred of his dignity. Nadia let out a bitter laugh, her eyes gleaming with a mix of anger and frustration. "Wake up, Karim. I was never truly with you. I was with your ambition, your wealth, the promise of a better life. But this?" She gestured dismissively at the mirror. "You were just a stepping stone. And now that the future I envisioned is no longer possible, I have no use for you anymore." Karim opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Nadia took a step back, adjusting her handbag in one swift motion, ready to leave. "Goodbye, Karim," she said over her shoulder, not even bothering to look back. "Enjoy your reflection. It's all you have now." The sound of Nadia's heels echoed down the hallway, each step growing fainter until it vanished completely. Karim stood there alone in the vault room, the silence broken only by the echo of his own thoughts and the unforgiving reflection of his image in the mirror. He stared at the mirror one last time, at the empty face staring back at him. Amira had been right. He had lost. And the only thing left now was the reflection of a complete fool. Thank you for watching this story unfold, a powerful reminder of how greed and deceit can lead to devastating consequences. Karim thought he could manipulate his way to wealth and happiness, but in the end, his actions left him with nothing but a hollow reflection of himself. Let this be a warning. Selfish ambitions and betrayal only pave the way to isolation and regret. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think Karim truly deserved? And don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to join a growing community of viewers who value meaningful, thought-provoking stories. Stay tuned for our next video. You won't want to miss it. See you soon and take care.